podcast where we meet exciting people with stories and mindsets that can inspire everyone, no matter where we are in life. My aim is that you as a listener can get an insight and some kind of genuine aspects into my guests' travel and journey through life and career, and also touch upon how we humans are motivated and developed, and how we deal with those big and small challenges we all face. So my name is Sissel Naustdal, and I founded MadeToGrow based on a huge passion for developing potential in ourselves and others. Because I believe when we feel we can use our potential, we also feel better about ourselves, and we can also be a greater resource for others. And today I have the pleasure of having Josh Stinton as my guest. And Josh, you are a really cool guy, and a special guy, I would say also, which I had the pleasure of meeting many times before, because you live in Norway and you are this charity adventurer, and I love to go more into that. But you are taking really on some of the world's hardest challenges to raise awareness and funds for small charities around the world.
That's
So
right.
you really, yeah. So the listeners, I'm sure that they are looking forward to hear more about some of the really crazy stuff you have been doing, and I know for sure you have a growth mindset. It wouldn't be possible to do what you are doing without it. In addition, that you have a great purpose and a big heart for contributing to a better world. So I look very much forward to our conversation. It's always good energy to talk with you, and getting some last updates on your ongoing projects as well. So a warm welcome. So happy to have you here. Give the listeners a short summary of your background with your own words, Josh.
Look, it's an honor to be here, Sissel. Thank you very much for having me, and I really appreciate the way that you had given a frame around that when you introduced this conversation, which is no matter where listeners are in life, and I think that is really interesting because it really is a journey, right? And I thought for a minute you were going to say no matter where you are in the world, which is also appropriate because this is a podcast, but also the where you're at in life, because it's such an interesting perspective to have from the context that we think that we're often in, or that where we're going to is constantly dependent on where we were, which isn't always the case, because we can constantly rewrite that narrative and that book of our lives. And I think that's a really good framing. So thank you very much for having me. And I'm honored by the warm words that you chose to introduce me. It's been a lot of fun creating my life story along the way so far, which has had some really ridiculous chapters in it. And I'm going to continue to make sure that stays the case. So, yeah, but I've been, my background is in business design methodology, facilitation and workshop design. I used to work with KPMG and PwC for many years. And over the past, wow, time flies, over the past 9 years, I've dedicated my time to creating these really big adventures to support children's causes around the world. So every adventure that I take on is to support a new children's charity. And for me, it's always about children. I'm just very passionate. I think children are the future of this. Well, I think it's empirically understood that children are the future of our existence. And so I just like to help contribute to in small ways that I can, to help as many young people out there write a life story that they would love to read. And I think it's not just my opportunity, it's my responsibility. So I've been really passionate about doing that, and the ways that I've gone about doing that has been pretty fun. Let's say so.
That's really cool. I look forward to, like, we really have to go into some of those projects so you can tell a bit more about some of the things you have done. But maybe first take us a little bit further back in your journey, because you are not Norwegian. You have traveled and lived different places. So maybe give a brief background where you come from, you have moved around in the world for different reasons, and
Mm.
like even what brought you to taking on this purpose of raising awareness and funding to charities for children.
Absolutely. So my background, I'm born and raised in Denver, Colorado. So I come from the US originally. And so I'm just geographically placing my story now. So from Colorado, I lived in Australia for about 14 years. And a big part of my story kind of starts in my time in Australia, because that's where the challenges that I take on, these adventures, kind of started in that period of my life. And I've lived in Mexico for a period of time, and I've also traveled around, done extensive traveling around Brazil and Argentina. So also been in South America, like where you're at. But I now I'm very happy to call Norway home for. It's been almost 8 years now that I've lived in two different places in Norway, in Stavanger and also in Oslo. So I'm in Oslo now, very happily in Oslo. Love Norway. But to your point on where my drive comes from for helping others, and it's been very much focused on children's charities for these adventures that I've taken on. But that starts back when I was like 6 years old. I remember I was in my grandfather's pickup truck. I was visiting him, he and my grandmother, when I was a kid. I used to go and spend my summers in my grandma and grandpa's place in South Dakota. So my grandma was full Norwegian. She came from Haugesund, which is that side of Norway my family's originally from. And when I was a kid for summers, I would go back and visit my grandparents and spend time. And there was one day in particular, I have a very, very strong memory about it. I was driving down the road with my grandpa in his pickup, and we were going into town because they lived out on a farm, so like it was quite remote. And old dusty pickup, and we were going into town, and I remember we had a bunch of food, like crops, like so we had a lot of corn, and there were some tools from my family farm that my grandpa was going into town, and he asked me to join him. And we went into town to basically meet up with some families that needed food, or someone in the family wasn't doing so well, so we loaned some tools so that way they could do some repairs in their house, etc. And I remember we were driving into town, and I remember looking at my grandpa, and I was like, why are we giving these things away for free? And like I didn't understand it because I had like 6-year-old economics in my head, right? And 6-year-old economics means the more money we bring in, that probably means the more toys I'm going to get, right? So I'm very focused on what's happening with our economics at this point. And
Yeah,
I
but maybe
remember
also even if you from your own childhood back in the US, like we are all used to, we have to go to the grocery store and pay for the money, no, pay for the food or everything else
yeah,
we need. So we are maybe not that used to seeing people who come around and giving stuff for free. So
yeah,
I guess that's
yeah.
also a normal reason, I guess, for your
Also
reaction.
true,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, many colors in this picture. So yeah, I remember we were driving in, and I asked my grandpa this, like, why don't we get money for the things that we're doing? And he said, so my grandfather, his name was Wesley, and he's an absolute angel of a person, and he was always really he always had jokes, really laughing all the time, and just always there for the good humor. And that changed when I asked this. He got very serious. I remember he looked at me and he said, as he was driving, he kind of looked over and he said, "Joshua?" I was like, "Ooh, this must be serious." I'm like, "He got my full name." And he's like, "Joshua?" He's like, "When you have an opportunity to help others, it's not an opportunity, it is your responsibility. And so what you're seeing us do today is our job. So we have excess food and materials, and so therefore we have to give at least a portion of what it is that we can do uh, to people that are in need of that right now." And it really made a massive impact on me. And I remember that whole day quite well. And I remember when we got to one of the houses, when my grandfather was leaving, this woman came out and she said, she really wanted to thank, and she did offer him money actually, and she wanted to thank him very much. And he wouldn't even, I mean, he accepted the thanks. He's a very kind man, but he wouldn't he didn't internalize the thanks like this. And this is way before selfies and the internet and everything else, right? So I mean, it was not a selfie moment, a pre-internet selfie moment. There's a sentence I didn't think I'd say today, but it was just very much about the act of service. It wasn't about the act of receivership for him. And I saw that on him so clearly, and it meant so much to me, and it stuck. So years later, I'm not a farmer. If I had to make a living, Sissel, as a farmer, I'd be a very hungry man. But thankfully, I'm not that. But I do, so I don't have crops and tools to give, but what I have is my time and my skill set. And my skill set, a big part of my life is creativity and coming up with things that are a little bit outside of the box. So what I've focused my time on is how can I dedicate my time to help others in need? And it's been a brilliant opportunity to come up with these adventures, and which has been it's been a really great vehicle for me to be able to share the story about children's causes and also help receive some donations and funding. So 100% of the money that I've ever raised during a challenge always goes to the charity. So it's not a career for me. It's like I mean, I think I'm being kind to myself when I say this, but it's like a glorified hobby. So I do earn a living as a presenter, and I do consulting work, and I help organizations with mindset. I've been doing that for a number of years now, but I've taken the things that I've learned from my professional life and applied it into my adventuring life, and found that you can do great things and have a good time at it.
And I think even, I guess, also the amazing challenges you take on. So you say you have some tools and skill set from your work life, your professional career that you can use in there. But for
Yeah,
sure, I hope you also get some learning and inspiration and experience from the challenges as well, which is useful for you into organizational life and the professional part of your career. Because like what happens on the inside, our thoughts, emotions leading to our behaviors, it's so applicable on all arenas.
yeah.
So you are, Josh, on both arenas, I guess. So what have been the most valuable learning you have taken from the charity work you are doing and into organizations?
There's so many things that I've learned, but one thing that I love to share on stage when I'm presenting this to audiences, because I usually speak to corporate audiences, and a thing that translates very well, aside from the whole world of growth mindset, which is something I think that we should all subscribe to, is the fact that there's no solo heroes, right? And
No solo heroes.
no solo heroes. Don't believe in that at all. So if any time that you see someone doing something incredible, regardless of geography or age or demographics, you name it, there's always people that have inspired that person. There are people that support that person either directly or indirectly. And we live in a hugely connected world where great people like yourself are using a platform to share insight for others that are mutually and quite symbiotically helping share and helping each other grow on a regular basis. And I think that there's a lot of freedom in that, right? And because inherently, I'm a pretty lazy person. I mean, outside of all the challenges and all this other stuff. So if I didn't have all of the insights from a young age, if I didn't have the drive and motivation that I get from the other people around me, I can't say that I wouldn't be me. You know, I wouldn't be that. I wouldn't have completed the things I'm very proud to have completed if it wasn't for the inspiration that I get around me on a regular basis. So when people are feeling a little bit low, or they're feeling like maybe a bit distant from people that they might look up to, or maybe in their own teams or departments or organizations or families, certainly you can see that within siblings, that it's very important to remember there's no solo heroes. Like we're always growing and gaining from one another. And again, once we have gained and grown, that it's important that we ship that information out to other people to be able to help them on their journey as well.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, and I think you touch upon so many valuable aspects. So one thing is we are never solo heroes, which I guess inspires to collaboration, relationship building, which is super important in organizations.
Yeah.
In addition to the growth mindset aspect, which is how our thinking patterns are supporting or hindering us from getting to do the stuff we would like to do. And also it's applicable for so many other aspects like change orientation, being outside the comfort zone, learning
Mm.
orientations, like all these things, which is really tightly, which is really connected to the growth mindset perspectives. But maybe we should go first to the purpose part, because what I hear in the words you're saying, Josh, is the force you have inside to do something purposeful. Like you already, as a young kid, saw this
Mm.
act of your grandfather doing good for others. So that's, I guess, at the core of your purpose, and which is also keeping you moving, even if it's tough times or if you feel lazy, whatever. That's some kind of inner force, I guess, you are leaning on. So tell a little bit about how you use that in your everyday life and how it's also relevant for organizations.
I think is very useful for it, certainly for myself, and hopefully any listeners to this might gain from this as well. The way that I look at purpose is that you have a relationship with purpose. And as we all know, anybody that's had any shape or form of a relationship, relationships they change in shape, and they grow, and they can be different things at different times. That's the nature of a relationship. It's two or various, especially in organizations, mutual parties on their own journey. And when you're on your own journey and you look at your connection with your purpose as a relationship, then it gives you a bit of space. It gives you a space to appreciate if you're feeling a little bit low, because we hear about purpose all the time. It's almost like this strong thing, like there's a place in the world that exists, and you can go to that place in the world and look through where all the purposes are. All the purposes are there, and you can look through all the purposes. You find your purpose, and you bring your and you have it, right. So you own your purpose now, and you can set it on your desk next to your plant and your picture of your family, and now you have purpose. You're good. And I find that so removing from reality, because purpose is not something that you can just have. I feel like because it's such a fluid thing. And when you have a relationship with purpose, then you can give yourself the amount of space and respect to understand it's okay if you have fallen off of your purpose. Or you certainly hear people say quite often, well, I'm not sure what my purpose is. And that's fine. It's identifying the things that it's like your emotional guidance system. They always say, trust your gut. The things that make you feel really good inside, that version of you that that you can or are destined to be. Like, picture that person and what makes that person really happy. Well, then you're starting to, at least in my journey, then you're starting to get the thing outline of your purpose. And then I feel that the most important thing is to not make yourself feel bad at any point in the journey that maybe a purpose isn't super strong to you right now, because that's okay. It's you're on track. The fact that you're even listening to something like this, or that you're even interested in hearing about purpose, means you're on track. It's just, where are you at in your current relationship with what your purpose is? And I, at any given point, I don't think it's fair to assume that everyone that you see walking around you in the world is meant to have one purpose and really strongly connected to that one purpose. And it's like, no, that's not it. It shifts, it changes, it grows. Things that were important to you 5 years ago might be less so now. And it's just understanding where you're at in connection to that. So, when I was very fortunate to have this conversation with my grandfather when I was 6, I'm 42 now. Has it always been that way in my life? Absolutely not. you know, but but it's important for me to have that as a guiding light. Like, I know that my North Star is to help others as best as I can. And am I always on track with that? no, there's certainly been times where I've been kind of left of center, or maybe I felt a little bit lost, and you feel it in yourself, and it's like, okay, well, how do you then start to redress? And for me, it's two simple. It's two simple tasks, really, and that is, as I mentioned before, picture yourself as your best version of you. Like, really meditate on that. Think about when you are at your best, when you're in flow, as people say quite often, and when you're really connected, what are the elements in life that are making you that person in this visualization of that? So start to think about those things and then unpack how close are you to those things. And that brings about a third thing, which is quite important. That is, what are some of the things that you might need to start sacrificing in your life to become closer connected to those things that are making that higher version of you feel great? And sacrifice is a tricky part, because then that means that there's work involved. And that's the hard
Yeah.
part sometimes.
And I guess just to help the listeners a little bit along the way, when you're imagining or visualizing yourself in that best version of you, you can look for who am I with, or what kind of, like, is it in conversations with people? Am I doing some specific activities? Where am I? So you have to find those, like, imagine those specific things, basically.
Yeah.
But then
And
you
like, how
also,
does that person, sorry, like, and how does that person feel? Because certainly, like, okay, living in Norway, October and November, and the weather starts to change, and people, the first thing people are thinking, the better version of me is on the beach in Spain. Like, and that's fine, but we could certainly kind of picture external environments that might make us happier. But the thing that's going to happen is you're still that person on that beach. So what is that person feeling? Like, what are the things that are really making that person tick? Even if the rain comes back, you're fine. What are really making you really feel connected to that higher version of yourself?
and it's quite a cool tool, actually. You, even though you're not uh, at the beach or close to a beach, or even in a country where you have a climate where you would like to go on the beach, you
Yeah.
can still, like, for example, in the morning, start your day closing your eyes and visualizing that you are this best version of you, or you are with people or in a place where you can be the best version of you, because the mind is easy to trick in a good way also. Which we get all the time to believe negative stuff about ourselves or others, or perceive
Mm.
outcomes or interpretations of things that happens. We can also put our emotional state into a situation we would like to be in, and then you can actually bring those emotions into your day and say, who do I want to be when I'm the best version of me? And you can
Yep.
bring those thought patterns, those emotions, and those behaviors into the day based on that,
Ab-
actually. So you can make your own beach
Absolutely.
in your mind, and
You
you
can
can
definitely
have the
make
same
your own
effects,
beach.
actually. Research supports this.
100%.
It's really cool how the brain is easy to impact like that.
100%. Like, and as we all know, that we're all experiencing a different lens of reality. You can have two people come from the same town and have a completely different outlook on what's happening around them. And just as, I mean, and that's a very fair way to put it. The mind's easy to trick. And it's also, I feel like the mind is easy to feed, because and whatever you're feeding it is essentially going to create the reality that you have around you. And I think that it's very important to look at that as our job to come from a design perspective, not just default, because default feeding the brain is so easy. Social media, conversations with people that we may or may not actually be that close to, or may or may not actually respect, you know, all these different things that it's like tiny little packets of information that are coming in and creating that realm of understanding, that world that you're in. And people can say manifesting, or people can say that we can put whatever words or whatever hashtags around it that we want to, and that's fine. But ultimately, you're just feeding your understanding of reality by what it is that you think, by what it is that you read, by what it is that you don't read, what it is that you choose. Because as they say, and there was a it was a movement. It was actually when in the early 60s, I forget the author, but there was a first book called Thoughts Are Things, and it was called the New Thought Movement way back when. And it's funny because I mean, we've come to understand that thoughts are things, right? Like this medium that we're speaking. No, we're getting quite deep, but this medium that we're speaking over was an idea at one point, and every single thing that exists around us was an idea. It just depends on what it is that you're feeding into yourself. There's probably so many listeners that are like, "Oh my gosh, this guy's been drinking red wine way too early on a Tuesday in Norway." But I stand by what I say.
It's actually Halloween, so maybe it's even allowed. I don't know.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
think,
perfect. And happy Halloween, by the way. But
yeah, happy Halloween.
it's just
So, but I
water in
think,
this side. Promise.
yeah, and I think just a practical example of what you're saying is how you can create your own reality is if you go into the bus after work today or and you see the bus driver, and if you smile to that person, you most probably will have a smile back as long as
Hmm?
the driver sees you.
Yeah.
So what you give is what you get. So like in those even small situations, like if I smile and be kind to people, more people will be kind to me as well. And if
Yeah.
someone is not kind to me, I can maybe instead of being frustrated or pissed or sad or whatever, think maybe that person just has a difficult day. Something happened. It's not about me at all. Maybe I can show some support or at least emotionally be understanding and not take in the negativity from other people around me. So we,
Mm.
what you give is what you get, what you feed your mind, the perspectives you bring in. All of this makes up your reality, as you're saying.
I just thought, here's an interesting play on perspective. We've all been a part of that. Like, say, if you were walking with someone and you bump into someone else that the other person knows, so you don't know this person, and they say hi and they introduce you to this person. And a few sentences later, that person says, "Oh, yeah, it's actually my birthday today." Then the mood will change instantly around everyone. Everyone's going to look at that person different and go, "Oh, like, oh," even if you don't know who that person is, right? You're going to go, "Oh, happy birthday. Great. Like, today's your day." And if if when you encounter, I don't know if encounter is the right word, but if you meet or you experience or encounter someone having a rough day or someone that's not, and it's a funny play on perception, and just think maybe it's their birthday today, and maybe something didn't go as planned, or maybe they got bad news on their special day. You're instantly going to view them with a different lens. And that's just a perception thing. So maybe that's a fun little trick. Next time you meet someone for the first time, just pretend it's their birthday. You'll come across very differently.
That's a really cool example. And actually, just a few days ago, one of my daughters showed me a video on TikTok with a daughter who showed the difference how her father met her at the door when she came to visit, if she came by herself or if she came with her small son. He was like 1 year old maybe. And like when the father opened the door and it was only her, he was like, "Come in," and then they just turn around and like didn't even pay attention or giving a hug, anything. And then she came with his baby and he was like, "Oh, so nice to see you," and
Yeah.
like full of enthusiasm. So this is like another example from what you were saying. So yeah, I think we can decide to bring a better version of ourselves, like back to the purpose again, like who am I at my best. And you can
Yeah.
practice. I don't say that we have to walk around and be smiley and shining and super enthusiastic all the time, because we have
Or
days
not.
which we don't really feel like that. But we train our body, our emotions, our hormones, everything, and our brain to being certain ways, and we can change if we want to. And the one who is benefiting the most from having such enthusiasm in their life is yourself, because when I smile to you, I at the same time smile to me, because I produce those chemicals even without you not seeing my smile at all. So
Yeah.
yes, I think it's so much about what you give is what you get, and you can give a lot to yourself as well, because it's super important. Because if you want to be a person who would like to help others, you say your grandfather always wanted to help others if you had the
Mm.
opportunity. And I think it's also important to make a point out of that some people give too much in a way which is draining their own energy and surplus. So you have to also give to yourself and make sure you have a balance there. And how do you
Absolutely.
manage to find that balance in giving and also taking care of yourself and giving to yourself?
That's exactly right. I mean, you think about, I mean, and obviously this is a very well-known example, but you kind of think about you're starting off with an energy tank that you have every single day. And if your tank is low, it's going to be very, very hard for you to give to other people. So I always say, like, make sure that your tank is full first. And I think that that's absolutely right. And then, that can be kind of overlaid as people saying, oh, maybe it's a bit selfish or whatever. I think selfish is actually a brilliant way to be when kept in check, obviously. But, really looking after yourself, because then you can give uh, more freely and more genuinely. And that's when you get a feeling of someone that's giving or someone that's kind to you because they're full in themselves. You feel it differently as opposed to someone that's kind, but probably a little bit low on energy themselves. Then that kindness, well, it still can come from a really, really good place, but that kindness can kind of come from a position of they're they're hoping to maybe get some energy back in return because we can't help it. When our tank is low, it's totally natural and understandable that we want that to be full, and you're going to find that. So if we're looking for that from the external, it's going to be hard for us to give from a place of genuineness unless we're actually looking after ourselves. So I think that that's definitely, again, back to how we're feeding our mind and how much space we're actually allowing ourselves to have when we're in the pursuit of our purpose and that higher version of ourselves, because it doesn't happen overnight. So like how much time you kind of use as a practice to make sure that when you check in your journey, as you said before, how much of your tank is actually full. And then when you are at that space, then you're able to give a lot more freely. And certainly I think, we were mentioning the challenges before. Like, I'm very fortunate in my life that I've had a number of inspirational people and inspirational circumstances that have brought me to a place in understanding that I gain a lot when I'm in a position of being able to help others or being able to create inspiring stories that will maybe get other people to help others. And it's not a quantifiable thing. It's not like in particular, how much money did you raise for that thing or how many people did you help? But it's just the fact that that's your energy base. That's where you're coming from. There's so much energy to be had from that. And yeah, I've certainly learned a lot from that along the way.
But it's absolutely a balance because some are giving and giving and giving and do not pay enough attention to themselves, so they're just draining themselves. Others might wait for too long because I don't really feel like my energy tank is full, so I don't have anything to give to others. I think it's important to pay attention to the elements of you can actually bring up your energy by doing good for others as well.
Yeah.
It's difficult in a society where we feel like we should perform in so many areas, there's so many performance expectations. Many things make people feel like they don't have this surplus of energy.
Yeah.
So I think it's a balance both ways. And what's since we're into this area, like what are your daily or weekly or monthly habits? What are the things you do to make sure that you can keep focused on your purpose, give to others, do your work, earn a living, but also make sure that you are filling up your energy tank?
For me, it's a check-in. I really appreciate me giving myself space, and I've got amazing people in my life. So I'm not saying like wall up and distance yourself. It can be perceived in many ways, but I think all of us need to have that space to make sure that not only are we on track for our North Star, or when's the last time we asked ourselves, what is our North Star? But also, I just had this conversation yesterday with one of my best friends, and he was telling me that he has a really, really hard time with time by himself because he gets a lot of energy from other people, but also He feels like there's boredom that can kick in. He's probably on social media a bit too much, which I'm a huge advocate of not doing. But he's really like, you could see it's not that he's lost. I mean, he's got a very clear purpose in life, and out of respect for him, I'll keep his story with him. But we got into a conversation around what his language is with himself, and what, like, how fluent is he in his own language, to where he can have that conversation with himself about what it is that he wants to be in the pursuit of. Because if we don't give ourselves the space to slow down and literally just spend some time by ourselves, have an evening, or I mean, especially with families, if there's a lot of little kids running around, that's going to be a little bit tricky to just say, I need an evening to myself. But just building out a bit of space in whatever way, shape, or form that you can, even for 5 to 10 minutes, then just to check in on where you, like, how your relationship is with yourself. What is the type of narrative that you're saying? Because that's so strong to build a constant foundational base to be able to be in the pursuit of other things. So I would say, in terms of habit, that's something that I'm very proud of, having learned and having been inspired by, is to make sure that I'm doing that. And I can also tell, like, the Josh that hasn't done that in a while becomes a different Josh than what that higher version of Josh is. Like, he needs to be able to kind of check in on it a little bit, because it's just super important. And the other thing is, for me, I know, and I think it's very respectful if people have a really clear agenda for their days. I'm purposely not that way. Like, it was a very fashionable thing to discuss. The first thing you should do every day is make your bed, because then you've done something, and that sets the foundation. And I purposely some days don't, which drives my girlfriend nuts. But sometimes I'm just like, nope, because for me, I have to change the narrative. Like, if I get too habitual in a routine, like, I must shift that pattern. There's a great book called it's called Carlos Castaneda. It was the what was the title? If you look up Carlos Castaneda, there is a main book, and forgive me, that's either the title of the book or the author, but he has this big thing around, if you always tie your right shoe first, one day just start by tying your left shoe. Just do little things to just remind yourself that you're a free-willed human being living out in the world. So for habits, I'm not super prescriptive. I have my training. I've got things that I'm very dedicated for, and yes, they do take dedication, but I find, like, it's nice to mix things up a little bit. So my key habit, I would say, is building in space to make sure that you've got a solid relationship and a solid language with yourself.
That's really good. And I think, yeah, when you come to think of the name of the book, we can put the author and the name of the book in the description for this conversation, so people can look it up. So yeah, I think there are some do's and don'ts. Everyone has to find their own habits. I know for sure that you take well care of your own health, because otherwise you couldn't be doing the challenges that you are doing. And I'm sure that as far into the conversation as we are now, I assume the listeners are eager to really hear a little bit more about those challenges. What are you actually doing, and what's the current project? So you can just maybe mention briefly the things you have done, and
Sure.
then take us into this project.
Sure. So as a bit of a background to this, so I don't have a huge history of being athletic and being very sporty. In fact, I was awful at sports when I was young, and that was my initial narrative about myself, which I'm just no good at sport, right? And so much so, like, in high school, I got kicked off the football team because I was just not a very great football player. And I come from the U.S. I'm talking about American, football. Funny football, the one that you use it with your hand. Anyway, we're all confused. But yeah, I remember, and so my narrative was always like, I'm not that good. And I remember my coach said, we'd like you to be, you're not. so ready for the fields. I was 15 years old. Like you'd probably be better as a camera person, and I actually wasn't even good at being a camera person. So I was like, okay, sport's not for me. So I just preface that, so I don't have this big like history of sport, but it started to shift narrative when I realized that I could use adventures as a vehicle to gain media attention and tell the stories of children's charities globally. So this was back in 2014 when this first kind of came into my life because I heard about that crazy ski race, Vasaloppet in Sweden, which I know many Scandinavians know of very well. And it's the longest cross country, it's 90 kilometers long, cross country ski race. Goes between Sälen and Mora. Sälen and Mora in Sweden. And I'd never skied in my life, and I thought I want to do that because at the same time I had met an incredible couple, James and Christy Thomas, that had a charity called Feel the Magic, and it was an Australian charity that was helping Australian children that were living with grief, and it was helping children learn that they're not alone, and that was the first point of understanding that you're not, anyone that's ever experienced grief is going to know you don't get over grief. It's not something you move on from. It's something you learn to live with. And one of the most important things in that is to understand if you're experiencing grief, you're not alone. And especially for young children, I really appreciated their work. So right around the same time, I heard about this ski race, and I thought, maybe I thought about, there's a lot of people, and it's as incredible. A lot of people do like a half marathon and donate here because I'm training for this thing. And I thought, well, maybe I could do that with this ski race, and which was pretty ambitious because I'd never skied in my life before, even though I come from Colorado. So that tells you how sporty I wasn't, being in a ski capital in the U.S. and not skiing. But I thought, yeah, I'd give that a try. And I was living in Australia at the time, so I committed to doing the race. It took me 2 years to actually get a ticket, but then I got an entry ticket into doing Vasaloppet. I'd never been to any skiing event like this before, and it was my second time ever to Scandinavia. And the first time was for work. It was definitely not for skiing. And one thing led to another. And because I was supporting this children's cause and very dedicated to it, I Googled how to train for cross-country skiing on land, and I found these roller skis, which common in Norway, Sweden, not common in Australia. So I was on these roller skis in the morning before work. I was going to the office at KPMG in the morning, and before that I was out on the streets roller skiing. I looked awful. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I looked like a young Bambi. I was falling over all the time. It's pathetic. And this woman one day, and she stopped me and she asked me, she goes, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, this is roller skis. I'm training to do a ski race." And she goes, "Yes, I'm Swedish. I know what those are, but what are you doing?" I was like, "Oh," I was like, "Yeah, I'm trying to learn how to ski." And then said, "I'm going to do Vasaloppet." And she's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah." And it turned out she was a journalist at a local paper, and she asked if she could do a story about why I was doing what I was doing, because I explained I was doing it to raise money and awareness for Field of Magic to help children living with grief. And that interview kind of took off, and the producers of the Today Show saw that and asked me to come on TV, and I was on live television in Australia, and then it just went on and on and on from there. And I started to build a bit of a profile as the charity adventurer, as they called me in Australia, which was brilliant. And the Norwegian ski team, Team Santander, the national team, reached out and offered to sponsor me. And by sponsor, I mean loan me skis and equipment to do the race. And I ended up doing it. And it was not an easy day, but it took me, you have to finish the race in 13 hours. It took me 11 hours, 8 minutes, and 58 seconds, but I actually completed it, having never, ever skied on snow in my life until the morning of the race. The start line of Vasaloppet was the first time I ever skied. And that was a really, really fun day. It was a very hard day, but it was a fun day because that was a massive narration shift for me internally, because up until then, I was the kid that got kicked off the football team because I wasn't good at sport, but now I've done this. And I actually got a little certificate from the Vasaloppet organizers because I was the first person ever to complete Vasaloppet without ever skiing before. Big surprise. But Yeah, it was great. So that kind of set a trajectory, and there was more media. I got on TV a couple more times as a result of that. And I was in the Swedish news, and then I learned with the Vasalopa, I was like, okay, well, if I can continue to take on these really big challenges that gain media attention, and I use that media attention to support a children's cause, because through the course of that, we raised enough money to help over 500 kids access grief counseling services that never had it before. So it just kept going from there. And then after that, I learned about a mountain unicycle race where people have taken a unicycle like you see in a circus, and like one wheeled bike. And I competed in the world's largest mountain unicycle race where I represented Australia and with, against 300 other people taking unicycles down a mountain off road, which was as ridiculous as it sounds and incredible. I didn't come last in that race, actually. I came fifth from last. So I was very proud of that. And then it kept going, and yeah, I've done the hardest mountain bike race in the world up in Alta, up in Norway, a 700-kilometer mountain bike race across the Arctic called Off-Road Finnmark 700. And I started to this as the story progressed. I started to look at things differently. Instead of signing up for races that exist, it was like, how can I use my creativity and my mindset to take on things that have never ever been done before? So then I wanted to be the first person to cross an entire country using only my arms, and so then I found like hand cycling, and I hand cycled the entire length of Japan from the furthest southern island to the furthest northern island. It took me 22 days, and I cycled 2,112 kilometers. So I was the first person to cross an Asian country. That the U.S. had been crossed before, and I think maybe some other people had crossed other countries, but I wanted to cross an Asian country. I'd never been to Asia before, so
Did you say
I
that you were
just
crossing like also the islands of Japan, or just like the biggest one from south to
the
north?
three, yeah, just the three, because there's thousands of islands,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
it's so
virtually
many.
impossible. Yeah, no, that I did not do. I crossed the three, so I did Kyushu, Honshu, and Hokkaido, so the three big islands of Japan.
Okay.
So that was, yeah, so that was absolutely incredible. And then in 2019, so that was in 2018. In 2019, I bicycled across the Atlantic Ocean. I cycled from Gran Canaria, and I bicycled across the Atlantic to St. Lucia in the Caribbean. So I'm the first person to have done that, which is fun. So the whole thing was like I had a bicycle gimbal on top of a sailboat, and I was basically racing the boat that I was on because there was a crew like on the ship, but I had to cycle more kilometers than the boat sailed every day, and I did it. In 15 days, I ended up cycling 6,434 kilometers, and set a record in cycling actually, because no one's bicycled across an ocean before. So it was wild, and
I'm,
that's the
I'm
thing.
glad
But
you explained how it worked, because when you first time told me about your bicycle across the
yeah,
Atlantic Ocean, I was like, "Hi, how is that possible?" So, but you were sitting. It was like a specially made bicycle. So you were
yeah,
sitting on a chair, like on the floor of the boat. I don't know what the English word is, but
on
deck
the deck, yeah,
in Norwegian, on the deck. Yeah, so you were
the
sitting
summit, yeah,
there having
yeah.
something to lean your back on, so people can even look into. I can maybe even share a link to this project or to your homepage so they can see for themselves. And then you were like with your feet paddling.
Yeah,
Um,
it was kind of like that. It actually was a bike. So it was a
yeah,
recumbent bicycle, and what the engineers did. His name's Matt Pidsley, and he was also the captain of the ship. But he designed this is like a gimbal, so like a hammock. So this bike stayed on that hammock. So no matter what the boat did underneath me, the bike always stayed still. So I was on a bike, like pedaling a proper bike, and the bike was set up to a resistance mechanism that was counting the kilometers that I cycled as I went along. So yeah, that was wild. Some pretty crazy storms, and I got hit in the face by a flying fish once. It was brutal. Yeah, it was really funny actually. Never experienced that before.
and you
But
didn't pass out from the hit.
uh, I don't think so. I don't think the fish did either. I actually threw that back in the ocean. But yeah, no, everyone walked away from that, but swam away from that. But yeah, but that's the thing. Like with all of these, so I've done 5 really big adventures so far, and I've got a couple more big ones coming up here. Next one's in spring, and then the other one's in September. But the thing is with, and I'll share what those are. But the consistent thing with all this is truly as I said, no solo heroes. I've had so many people around me supporting this stuff and helping me with the ideas. I always have these silly ideas, and a lot of people help me bring them into shape. But the way that that happens is because the way that I think about them is if they're already done, right? And the way that I'm connecting and communicating with people isn't like, oh, maybe, I mean, it would be kind of cool if, or I'd like to. It's like, no, I'm going to do this thing. I just have to, just do the thing, but it's already done in my mind, like the way that this is going to work out. And I'm so driven by the fact that fortunately so many children have been helped as a result of the media attention and the awareness that's come about these with these challenges happening. It's for me, I'm just getting started. There's just so many things. I've got this list that just goes on and on about
Yeah,
all this stuff that I'm in the process of bringing into life.
it's really
So
cool.
it's yeah, it's been a wild ride.
So the project is emerged, so you put in your own work and time, like effort, time and effort into this without taking
Mm.
any money out.
No.
Then you find, or the sponsors might even find you, you find a cause, like a charity. So
Mm.
it's a triangle collaboration, which you put in your time and effort, some sponsors who get some branding or visibility, I guess, through the project as
Not
well.
really even any sponsors, to be honest. I
No?
don't really even work with sponsors all that much. Not to say that I wouldn't. I mean, that said, I have had some, like the Norwegian ski team have sponsored me by loaning me some equipment. I've had Devold from Norway. They've sponsored me with some wool for the mountain bike race. So I've had some like equipment to help me make it easier, but I've never received any financial sponsorship. I
No,
paid
but
for
no,
everything out of
no,
my
no.
own
I know
pocket.
it. I know that no money goes to you, but for developing, for example, the bicycle on the boat or other special equipment you need to actually do the challenge, who is paying for that?
I do. All of it.
You do,
All of it.
always?
Yep.
Oh,
Everything.
really?
It's always been paid by me
So
out of
you
my
put in the
pocket.
time and money to actually go through with the challenge, and then you
Yep.
raise money to the charity, and then all the
Absolutely.
money that is been raised to the charity goes directly there with no money to you at all. Wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah, that's exactly
impressive.
right.
You are
Yeah,
so much
it's
like your grandfather, but yeah, I'm really, yeah, you have found a way of doing those kind of really great things, which is so good for society and for other people, is benefiting many kids around the world. With you having a purpose which keeps you alive, keeps you engaged, also gives some great learning, I guess, and then
absolutely.
you bring some value into organizations and how those perspectives are relevant for them as leaders or in the culture or as employees.
That's it. And also to help the listeners understand as well, like when I say, I mean, there's no sponsorship dollars that come into it. And yes, I have paid for everything out of my pocket. That said, there are people that do donate their time. Like, so Matt, the engineer, I paid for the materials when we built that bike, but Matt and the engineering team had donated their time and skills to make that go. So there isn't like a huge dollar or cost price that I'm looking at, like, a huge expenditure. There's a lot of people that have helped kind of mitigate the costs on things. And there have been different organizations that have provided me with like hydrolyte, little like electrolyte tablets and things that kind of help me
Yeah,
go as I'm doing the thing. But yeah, in terms
great.
of any sponsorship dollars that have come in, no.
But last time we spoke, Josh, you were talking about the project about some air balloon thing in the Stavanger area. That's the last thing I heard about your project.
Yep.
So just a little bit, we're approaching the end of the conversation. We could go on for like 2 more hours, I'm sure, with no problem. But what specifically, like, what's the next project? What are you working on now?
So there's a couple things in the pipeline, but the Sky Run is what you're referring to, and that's taken a while to bring to life because what it is that I'm working on now, I've been working with engineers from NTNU, the Technical University here in Norway, and for any listeners that are in Norway, and also NASA, because what I wanted to do was actually run across the sky. And so I've been working with some incredible engineers. Same person, actually, Matt, the captain of the ship when I sailed across the sea. He and his team, and I have paid for time on that, have come up with a design for an airship that will be powered by a human hamster wheel. That when I run, it'll turn these propellers to make the balloon actually move through the air. And that's taken me about 4 years to produce that challenge, but it's taken a different shape and size. But now that I'm a proud ambassador for Oslo Marathon, me living in Oslo for so long, so I've actually moved the challenge to be here in Oslo for where I live. So the plan is on September 21st on the next Oslo Marathon, I'll be launching the Sky Run at that on that day. So that's what I've been working on very heavily for the past few years, which has been very exciting.
It's really, really
And
cool.
for and to point to note on that, I'm very proud to support Right to Play. So it's the biggest organization. I usually support small charities. Right to Play is a bit of a larger organization, but they have a reach in helping. My ambition for them is to help them help at least 10,000 young girls around the world gain access to education that will give them a life that they want by design. And so that's something I've been very proudly supporting for for going on 4 years now.
Yeah, wow, it's really, really amazing. And I'm sure that it wouldn't be possible to do any of this unless you had this growth mindset,
Yeah, yeah,
both in changing around the related to sports, if you are a sports kind of guy or not. Obviously you are, because all these challenges involves being physically active, and I know that you work
mm,
out quite a lot to keep a physical shape that allows you to actually accomplish and go through with these really, really tough and cool challenges.
yeah.
um, but also, I think it's so many nice points we could touch upon. We can more like briefly mentioning it, but in a time where being innovative and creative is really important, how you manage to find solutions to both like the technical gear that you have to use to accomplish the challenge, but also
Mm.
how to find people, how to make things come together. Always like have to think in new ways and find new solutions. So innovation, creativity is really, really relevant. I think, I guess you talk about that also into organizations,
I
growth
do, yeah.
mindsets, collaboration, I guess some kind of leadership, how to make people work together and accomplish great goals. So it's so many aspects of what you're doing which is relevant in the work life in addition to personal
Absolutely. And for simplicity's sake, I mean, one thing that it really boils down to is conviction, right?
life. Yeah.
That inner belief that what is going to come is absolutely going to come. Right? And it doesn't mean that we just sit by and wait for things to happen. We have to act. I mean, we have to get involved in the story of our own life. There's no being a bystander in your story. You've got to act. But when you're speaking with conviction, and again, this is back to why my number one habit, which is so important for me, is to get some space to make sure that I'm on track with myself. Because when I'm speaking with people about the sky run, or back when it was about hand cycling Japan or bicycling the ocean or anything that I do on a daily basis now, I speak with conviction about what I do because I absolutely believe in the potential of it happening and the importance of it happening because it's going to be helping people along the way. If at any point when we're speaking to someone and we cannot speak with conviction about it, that's one of two things. One, we haven't slowed down and given ourselves enough time to actually connect with what it is that we believe or not. Or two, we actually don't believe that it's going to happen. And if you don't believe it's going to happen, then either, but if it's important to you, then either slow down and take space to find out what thinking that you need to bring in, like we were talking about before, that's going to make that a reality in your head, Or two, if you don't believe it's going to happen and it's not actually that important to you, then it's probably okay to let pass by and then go and talk about the thing that you will have conviction about.
And I think we just have to touch upon those elements because you seem to be so confident in yourself and the things you are doing, and maybe you've always been really confident. Maybe you grew up with parents or in a supportive environment where you got to actually have that self-esteem, which is the fundamental essence of managing to create a good life and career for yourself. I see so many people who struggle with self-doubt,
Yep.
self-esteem, self-love, and I know it's not easy, even though you have this huge dream, some kind of purpose or passion. But if your mind or thoughts constantly say you will not manage to do it, you don't have what it takes. And I think for 98% of people, we have, at least to some degree, those kind of thinking patterns. And most people struggle with having too much of them in the sense that they can't take on
Heavy.
even ordinary challenges. They cannot even
Yep.
speak up for themselves in a meeting. They cannot speak up for themselves in their marriage. They cannot speak up to themselves towards the rude teenage kids or whatever they are dealing with in their life. So, what's your input to people? Because building that confidence, that's not a quick fix.
No, it's not. And I think that's another thing as well, with when it comes to giving yourself the permission to have conviction about something. And if we're not feeling confident, one of the first things, again, this all goes back to relationship, that and the relationship with yourself, in my experience. Because yes, I do have a very supportive family, which I'm proud to say, but I've had many moments in my life where I was not confident. Like I moved around a lot as a kid, so in many different schools around the US, I was the new kid. And that brought all sorts of different shapes and sizes of experiences. Not always great. And in my journey, the thing that I've learned is if I'm not confident, the first thing that I need to understand is that's okay. It's okay. Like,
Yeah.
because a lot of things that we hear is like, well, do this, get up earlier, fight harder, it's like more energy, more energy. Well, we know in life enough from a basic understanding of the way that things work. If you fight energy with energy, no good. So the first thing is to just give yourself space and say, okay, I'm not feeling confident about this. Or if other people, and if you have people in your life, and hopefully you don't have people like that in your life, but if you have people in your life that are telling you you're not confident, then start to draw kind of lines around things and just realize that everything outside of you is external, and what it is that we can do to give ourselves space and self-appreciation that, no, I'm not feeling very confident about this. And then you meet yourself. Then you start the process of giving a bit of space to say, that's okay. If I were to be confident, what would that version of me maybe think about this? And what can I do today? Not, okay, I listened to a guy on a podcast. Now I'm going to go climb Mount Everest. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, it's not going to happen. But what are you able to do on a daily basis once you give yourself a bit of space and appreciate that maybe you're not feeling strong about something? But if it's something that's important to you, if we're talking about a goal, or if we're talking about a life change, if we're talking about absolutely anything, what's important to you that's going to require confidence, and how can you build that in on a daily basis? And again, I think a lot of that comes back to how much space we're giving ourselves, and how much we understand what we actually feel about ourselves in the pursuit of something. Because when you're connected to yourself, even on a small bit, that's the right track, and then just giving yourself the permission to pursue that feeling a little bit more on a daily basis. And then ultimately you might mess around and find yourself taking a unicycle down a mountain if you're not careful.
And it might be then pointing back to what we talked about earlier in the conversation about how you can visualize yourself being the best version of you. Most people have at least one arena or a few experiences where they felt more strong in themselves and more, yes, like having this self-esteem or this belief in yourself. So go back in your mind and visualize
Yeah.
some time you had this feeling of being having a strong sense of trust in yourself, and visualize it and take in those feelings and remind your body. And if you do that kind of training, it's the same like if you go to the gym a few times a week, you will build your muscles physically.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you also do some kind of mental training, I know they have been doing this for years in the sports industry, is almost as impactful as the physical training. So you
Wait.
can train yourself into that kind of self-esteem also. And then you will gradually, as you say, take those small steps, practice, doing a little bit every day or every week, that takes you in the direction of what you would like to accomplish. So,
Absolutely. So your brain doesn't know the difference. So it's been proven you will actually build synaptic connections by visualizing an exercise
yes,
and not
yeah,
even doing it. Like because
yeah,
your brain doesn't know whether or not you're doing it or not. And if you can build synaptic connections based off of visualizing it, you can also deconstruct, right? Like you can
yeah.
also give yourself a negative story. It just depends on back to what we said at the beginning, it just depends on what we're feeding ourselves with. And also not feeling bad if we are in a pattern of feeding ourselves negativity and just go, okay, well, I see that. Well, I want to stop doing that thing now. And maybe for the next 20 minutes, I'm just going to force myself to think about what it could be like if it was different. Because sometimes it's a hard pattern break, and that's okay.
Or even just turn on some nice music you like. Only
Mm,
music by itself can change your state and your feelings. Or if you dare just stand up and dance for a few minutes, and it will change your
totally.
inner state immediately. So, but let's see if we can do a short summary. Like I would like you to close it off. But for me, from what I'm hearing, we have talked so much about the purpose and
Mm,
searching for some kind of North Star, or at least allow it to come to you. It might be
mm,
in terms of helping others in some shape or form. It seems to me, at least when I meet people, all people seems to have a purpose which is in some way related to helping others. So
mm.
finding a purpose or a North Star, building a growth mindset, because you need the tools to be able to go that path and face the challenges, big and small. And
Yeah,
then you need to have some kind of balance. So health, mentally, physically, taking care of your own health, and then build a strong confidence. And they all are, of course, connected. So when you start working on the one of them, it will have an impact on the others. So, but let me hear
absolutely.
from you. If you were to summarize, like your final inputs, your final um, thoughts,
And
tips.
I mean, and to make it really simple, I'm a very simple person. I'm a huge fan of simplicity. So to make it very simple, find ways to build space in your day for yourself. And I know I hear people because you give talks and you hear people say like, "Oh, I don't have any time." Yeah, your phone might say that your screen time is gonna tell you a bit of a different story. So maybe if I'm a huge advocate for not gluing yourself to social media. I'm not much of a social media person, but I used to be, and I've noticed a massive change in my own motivation and perspective when I kind of just stayed away from it. So be careful of the stuff that we're feeding into ourselves. Give yourself space and really connect with that inner person, that version of yourself that is there. I mean that, and that's actually the real person. That's who you were meant to be,
Yeah,
and give yourself like just pay attention to the things again that makes her or him really really feel strong, and
yeah.
give yourself that conviction that you are worth going after that thing. Because
Mm.
this sounds very like quintessential, like a very American thing, like or kind of cheery thing to say, but we do only get a finite amount of time on this earth. It's not a given. We're not here forever. And what it is that you're going to do with it is really by your design. So,
Mm.
are you going to write a life story that you would love to read?
Yeah. If you were to be someone would play your life as a theater or on the stage, will
Mm,
it be a play people would like to go and watch, or if it was a book, would people want to read it? And I
And
would
actually,
say
even more than that, to be honest, just one point on that. To be honest, in a way, I kind of think it's important that people maybe don't care if other people want to go read it. Just would you like to read it? Because
yeah,
it's your book. It doesn't have to be entertaining or action adventure. Like, is that
yeah,
something that you would be proud of? To me, I
yeah.
think that's the most important part.
And I had a really, really nice conversation with a woman in India a few months back. And she has been writing a couple of books, and she's really into raising awareness around how women can have better life quality and more rights.
Hmm.
And I said in the
Good.
final part of the conversation, what's the thing you would like people to remember you by? And she said, I just want to make people feel good after they have been together with me. Like
That's
just the
nice.
feeling. For her, that's the purpose. Make
That's
people
super
feel
nice.
good when they have met her. That's all she wants to focus on. So it doesn't have to be, oh, I have to be a writer or I'm making a documentary or having this impressive CV or some titles. No, it's just, I think it's so much down to the core of what's it about to be a human being. It's about feeling good about yourself and making others feel good about themselves. So
Hmm.
give it a step.
Yeah, that is nice. I heard something brilliant with one of I think it was the second charity that I'd supported. Actually, it was another group in Australia, and they said, the key function of a charity is to make itself go out of business
Yeah.
because that means the thing was solved, right? And I think that there's something really nice in that, and I must say that when I hear that, I mean, if we're talking about like after I'm like dead and gone, and the thing that I would like to be remembered is, in a way, to be honest, I'm not too bothered about being remembered. At all. I quite like the idea of, if my time here was able to ship some information out, would help people do or create or be something that maybe that where they got it from was forgotten. Brilliant. That's fine. I'm kind of fine with that. I think it's
Yeah.
yeah, just to kind of make yourself redundant in a way.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun.
I like that too, and it comes to leaders also. If you can make yourself redundant, people can manage without you. You have done a brilliant job as a leader. So I think that's really great. I look forward to the next conversation, whenever that will be, Josh. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and listen into your
Likewise.
perspectives. And I love your enthusiasm, your engagement, and how you practice growth mindset and your purpose in the way you are. So I'm sure that the listeners here to this podcast have had some great values as well. So thank you again. And
I I appreciate that. And just to offer an extension, if anyone has any questions or would like to have a conversation, my door is always open to help people on their journey. So I'm always open for that chat.
I know because I've been sparring with you as well on my
Yeah.
journey. So I know for sure you are a really, really caring guy and who supports and always a big smile. So that's a really great person to have in my life. So thank you for that also.
Likewise, my friend. Appreciate that. And thanks again for having me. And happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, at least today.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much for listening into the conversation and see you in the next episode.